What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 77. We got a matchup of two top 10 bantamweight fighters here. Obviously, both these fighters at very different points in their career. Holm, about a decade older than Myra Bueno Silva. Silva has been looking very good as of recently, showing to have a lot of tricks in her bag, pulling off a variety of subs. We know she's a decent striker. Holm, what do I need to say about her? You guys know about her, man. Like I said, she's about a decade older than Silva, so she's 41 years old. She's definitely at the end of the road. A phenomenal striker, a phenomenal mixed martial artist. I mean, she's put it all together. She's an absolute horse. And even as of recently, she's still been looking decent in the cage. We can't really say at this point in time that she's way past her prime and needs to hang it up. I mean, this is still a fighter that's capable in the division. So it's a good fight, but let's be very realistic. This is a very shallow UFC card. This is about as bad as it gets. But again, us real fight fans will be excited for this card here. We'll be looking to make some money. We'll try to find our spots, and that's what we're all about here. Before we jump into the first fight, I will let you guys know, I've seen some of you guys at times say some of my full card prediction videos are a tad bit long, so I'll try to be a little bit more to the point, especially with a card like this. Being sandwiched in between UFC 290 and 291 makes it even look that much worse as well. So I'll try to be more direct and to the point with these breakdowns, and maybe I'll do that a little bit more so moving forward if you want to give me some feedback on that. And then other than that, I do have a question for you guys. Please give me some feedback on this. I want to get back to doing the recaps of these cards. Do you want me to do the recaps at the beginning of the following week's breakdown video? Like as of right now, I'd be doing a recap, or do you want them to have their own separate video? That question there, I really would appreciate some feedback if you guys can give that to me. I've been recording a lot of these prediction videos ahead of time of the previous card taking place, right? So that's why you haven't been seeing me pop them off. Like right now, I don't have my results for UFC 290, but please, if you guys can give me some feedback there, I would like to know, would you rather have them have their own separate video, or would you rather have them be right at the intro? Would you want me to quickly go over them? So I'd appreciate that feedback there. And that's about it. We're going to jump into the first fight. All right, let's get it.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have the return of Ashlee Evans-Smith as she welcomes Ailin Perez to just her second UFC fight. Of course, Perez, a newcomer, still pretty green, a girl that is polarizing in her own way. We'll talk about her here in a second, but I want to talk about Ashlee Evans-Smith a little more so. A fighter that has, really got her hands dirty in a variety of ways outside of fighting in the cage, and props to her for some of that. I mean, she has some type of MMA sex talk show that she hosts. That's a little weird. It is what it is. Not really my thing, but I give her respect for finding her little niche outside of just getting her head beat in, right? A fighter that has horrible striking defense too. We're going to talk about that more so in a second. But and on a serious note, she has been doing some work in the MMA world besides just that little porno type MMA sex show that she's doing. You see her interviewing fighters on some of the smaller regional scenes and whatnot. And I think it's cool. I think it's a smart idea for all fighters to do, right? To have different avenues to make money besides just fighting, because that will not always be there for you. So even though I know I'm poking some fun, and if you go down to your local dive bar, she won't be there to slide you a rum and coke currently, as she's back to training full time and she's looking to fight again. I know I'm poking some fun at her, but I do want to say props to her for figuring her thing out here. So Ailin Perez, this is another fighter that's definitely looking to bring more to the table than just her fighting ability. I mean, this is a girl that's shaking her butt. She's pop locking and dropping it at the weigh-in. She's okay, right? She's not like the hottest chick out there, but she has that tough and wild kind of vibe to her. So I think that's a smart idea. I think that it will allow her to have more opportunities, right? She might lose this fight here. She'll be 0-2 in her first two UFC fights, and she might get another opportunity. Maybe they'll throw her in there with a Veronica Hardy or something like that. I don't even know if they're in the same weight class, so maybe I'm wrong there. They're not, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? The UFC loves to match up those types of women on specific fight cards, and we love to watch those kind of fights. But to this specific fight here, let me cut to the chase. Ashlee Evans-Smith will be the bigger fighter. She's 3 inches taller. She'll have about a 1.5 reach advantage. You kind of expected that as soon as you saw that this fight was matched up, right? Ashlee Evans-Smith, not a small fighter for the division. Ailin Perez, a little bit more thick. She's tough. She's had a very padded record before she made her UFC debut against Stephanie Egger. In that fight, I thought that she did once again show that she's tough and she looks to bring the fight, but she kind of was outclassed at the end of the day when it came to the grappling. She did work her way up from one takedown. She got caught a lot in those judo throws, those head and arm throws. She did work her way back up at one point in time, but eventually she was submitted. I think she got caught in a rear naked choke, if I remember correctly. And this is a fighter that's very green. Again, you take a look at the level of competition before she got the opportunity to fight in the UFC, fighting very low-level fighters, but she's tough. Okay, she is a tough fighter, and she will come out there and she'll look to take you out. All right, 4 knockouts out of her 7 wins. Also, take note, the one loss that she had before the UFC debut loss was a fight where she was looking very good, and I think she was basically beating the brakes off her opponent, but got DQ'd. I think she kicked her opponent in the head or something when she was down. I forgot exactly what it was. I've seen that a couple times, though, breaking on tape on her. She just made a mental error in there, but she was the fighter that was in control of that fight. Ashlee Evans-Smith, definitely losing a lot as of recently, but look at the level of competition. Norma Dumont, Andrea Lee had a win over Beck Rawlings, a similar fighter to an Ashlee Evans-Smith, right? All tatted up, kind of from a different age, a different era of MMA, an older era. She got caught in an armbar by Sarah Moras. I know that Moras is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but that's not a good look. The loss to Ketlin Vieira. We know Vieira's the real deal. Raquel Pennington, a very solid fighter. Speaking of Veronica Hardy, who is since dropped down in weight, I believe, but whatever, we talked about her. Marion Renaud, and Renaud was, that fight against Renaud was back in 2016, 7 years ago. So at the time, Renaud was only, I think, like 49 years old, as we know that Marion Renaud is probably, almost creeping up on 60. But all jokes aside, let's cut to the chase here. Ashlee Evans-Smith is a fighter that has very bad striking defense, absorbing 4.69 strikes per minute. And, when you break down tape on her, even her recent tape, you saw the last fight with her against Norma Dumont, her head is just constantly on the center line. So even though she'll throw a lot back towards Perez's way, I think that Perez will have her opportunities to land. I think she'll be aggressive. I'm going to pick Ailin Perez to win this fight. I do not say it with a lot of confidence. There's a lot of X factors here, a lot of things you have to take into consideration. And the biggest thing is, of course, the fact that that Evans-Smith hasn't been in the octagon since the end of 2020, creeping up on 3 years right now. And she just hasn't been active. And like I said earlier, she has a lot of distractions and other things going on outside the octagon. This might have been just an opportunity for her to come back and kind of make people remember her name. And as she does all these other things outside the cage, it'll help that platform. I think that might be a little bit of what's going on here. She has a 6-5 pro record and is just really never impressed that much. So check this out, though. We take a look at BetUS. Ailin Perez opens as a -300 favorite. That's ridiculous. She's now currently a -155, a much more realistic line. I don't know what was going on with this betting line here. Even the -200 line on her, I don't know how you could trust her in that spot. Any of these types of lines are a little crazy to me. 210. Now, if you want to say -135 to -155, if you want to argue with me there, maybe I won't argue with you to the death, but I'll still say the value here is on Ashlee Evans-Smith. She shall have a little bit of that size advantage. She's been in there with a more reputable competition. She's somewhat more proven. The long layoff, though, I don't know if you could trust her there either. Give me Ailin Perez. I don't say it with a lot of confidence, and I'll say there's more value on Ashlee Evans-Smith than anything with the plus next to it. We got another fighter that's making their return to the cage after quite a long layoff. Alex Munoz hasn't fought in just over 2 years. The Team Alpha Male product. He's taking on Carl Deaton III. Alex Munoz, a lot of you guys became familiar with him when he fought Nick Newell on Dana White's Contender Series. He got the job done, didn't get the finish, didn't get a contract, went out, got another victory outside the UFC, and then he got some opportunities to fight in the octagon. He went 0-2. His last fight, a little bit controversial. Some people thought that he should have got the nod. It was a split decision loss to Luis Pena, talented, rangy fighter there. And, Alex Munoz, he's a fighter that, he really resembles the Team Alpha Male product. He has that wrestling background. He uses his athleticism to strike. He's not necessarily the most polished striker, but he'll use his athleticism to get away with some quick kicks, and he has some power in his hands. He's a vintage Uriah Faber product type of fighter, if you ask me. So I'm excited to see him back. This is a fight that I think that he should have some success here against Carl Deaton. Carl Deaton took I believe, a short notice fight in his UFC debut. So granted another opportunity here. Took on Joe Selecki. Was basically controlled the entire fight, had his back taken, and was controlled for the majority of that fight before he was finally submitted at the end of the second round. Early on, he showed some toughness and showed a decent ability to keep the fight standing. Shrugged off a couple takedown attempts from Selecki, but Selecki, a little bit of a different offensive grappler, right? As far as takedowns go. I mean, he's not a guy that really has that wrestling background. He's a true jiu-jitsu guy. Munoz might be able to sneak in some takedowns and get on top early on and work the grappling there as well. Deaton's a tough dude. I really don't believe him to be a UFC caliber fighter, if you ask me. 17-6 as a pro. He's 33 years old. Doesn't look to be in the best shape. I mean, right now, you take a look at Munoz. Munoz is in phenomenal shape coming into this fight, right? So you got two different type of animals here, if you ask me. Deaton's tough, but again, I mean, you got a guy that's seems to be in much better shape. But not only that, check this out too. Alex Munoz, this is a guy that we've seen be at the on the side of being shorter or having less of a reach against certain other opponents. Here, he's going to have about a 5-inch reach advantage. He's going to be about 2 inches taller. He has all that going for him, even to go along with the skill set he possesses. So I like Alex Munoz here. I think the wrestling comes into play. He has power in his hands as well. Maybe we see him land some big shots there, but I think the wrestling comes into play when it really comes down to it. So yeah, I think Alex Munoz will be a little bit too much for Carl Deaton, and that's where I'm going there. Let's take a look at this betting line here. Alex Munoz currently a -135 favorite. Actually a -140 right now. He opened up as a -190. So major line movement going Carl Deaton's way. So maybe there's something going on out there that some of these sharps know about, but I haven't been too impressed with what I've seen from him. I think the long layoff that Munoz is coming off of, maybe some injuries and whatnot. Maybe some people have some question marks, but looks to be in phenomenal shape. And I think Munoz is showcased to be the better fighter so far in his young green career. I say young career. He's not really that young, but doesn't have a lot of mileage on him, right? He's 33 years old, but only has 8 pro fights, so he still has more to give, if you ask me. Give me Alex Munoz to get the job done. Maybe he sinks in a choke later on in this fight, similarly to what we saw in the Selecki fight. Maybe he wears on Deaton and breaks him and subs him in the 3rd round. So when one flyweight Kazakhstan fighter gets the boot, the UFC welcomes in a new Kazakhi flyweight fighter in Azat Maksum. And I'm just assuming that we'll never see Zhalgas Zhimagulov fight in the octagon again after the string of performances that he's put on, and combined with his age. I really believe he should be cut from UFC. I'm sure he has already been. I haven't even paid too much attention to that. But we got a new Kazakhi flyweight fighter here, Azat Maksum. This kid, 28 years old, has looked pretty good. He's undefeated, 16-0. Of course, you have to take into consideration that early on his record was extremely padded. I believe his first 4 or 5 fights, they don't even really register the method of victory. He was fighting against a bunch of fighters that were making their pro debuts. So no shame on him. I mean, he was new himself. So, I mean, it was what it was. But just understand that this is not a record that's 16-0 against high-level competition. Now, as of recently, he's been fighting higher-level competition. He's been fighting some Brazilians and whatnot. He's been looking good. He's been actually finishing fights more so recently than ever before throughout his career. And I think he's definitely deserving of an opportunity here. He's taken on Tyson Nam. Tyson Nam, 39 years old now. We know that Nam's coming off a tough loss. I want to talk more about that fight here in a second. But you do have to understand that Nam is always a very dangerous fighter. He carries some serious power for the division. And if you're not on your P's and Q's, he could definitely put you out. All right. This is a fighter that has a lot of experience. This is a great welcoming partner for the Kazakhstan fighter here. So Tyson Nam, now I said I want to talk about that last performance, right, where he was finished by Bruno Silva. You guys know I'm very high on Bruno Silva. He was submitted in that fight, but he took a lot of damage early on. And Nam is usually a fighter that showcases to have a good chin. He's very durable, but he's taken a lot of damage throughout the years. Matt Schnell was landing on him quite a bit. Took a lot of shots from Kai Kara France. Sergio Pettis broke the record at the time that fight took place for the most significant strikes landed in the division. All right, he was just getting his face jabbed up in that fight, getting his nose boxed off. Some notable performances. He knocked out Zaruk Adashev, a fighter that stepped in on short notice, looked very pudgy at the time. Knocked out Jerome Rivera, a complete flake. The big knockout was his knockout against Ode Osborne. Still, though, when you're going in the octagon and you're continuously knocking your opponents out, I don't care the level of opponent, it showcases that you do have some power. So I do believe Tyson Nam is live here to land a big shot. Azat is kind of calculated on the feet, very patient. But, this is a fighter in Azat that's a well-rounded fighter. He's showcased to be a submission threat. I think he's going to be the better grappler here, and I think he's going to eventually try to get this fight down to the mat, even though he'll be comfortable hanging around on the feet as well. He'll kind of be patient. He'll look for his shots in the feet, but I do think that eventually he will try to get this fight down to the mat. That's kind of how I see this fight going. Look, as of recently, pulling off a couple submissions. 2 of his last 3 victories came by way of submission. I think he had a barbell choke against Fabricio Nunes. And we talked about the recent fighters that he's been fighting. Just these fighters are a little bit more respectable, the resumes in these fighters, than early on in his career. So he's starting to put it all together, I believe, at the right time, as he has his UFC debut set for this upcoming weekend. I'm going to be taking the UFC newcomer to get the job done. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. We got Azat Maksum. Right now he's a minus 415 on BetUS. So, I guess people liking what they're seeing on him, right? And there's a world of fight tape on him. If you go online, if you go to YouTube, a bunch of free fights for you available. I believe he was fighting under the Brave banner for some of those fights, and those fights are there for you to break down. He's looked good. He's looked well-rounded. And then again, Tyson Nam, I think the damage has started to accumulate on him. He's been looking a little rough. He was wearing that damage from Bruno Silva early on, not in the greatest way, and it was eventually subbed there. So I think that we're going to see Azat pick up right where Nam was in that last fight. I think Azat may get a finish in this fight if he pushes the pace. Maybe he sets up that sub as they go to war and eventually locks in the sub within the 2nd or 3rd rounds. We'll see how the fight goes, but interested to see how the UFC newcomer performs there. As far as the betting line, it's a little high for me. For a fighter that really hasn't been fighting the stiffest of competition. Well, you got Tyson Nam, a true veteran who still looks to be in good shape, and you can grab Tyson Nam right around that plus 315 range. I would say there's more value on him there. I'm not crazy about parlaying Azat in the minus 400 type of range, right? It's a little high for me. Genaro Valdéz, looking to get back into the winning column here. He's been going through some tough times. He has a tough test in front of him. Evan Elder, who's also coming off a loss, but a little bit of a different type of loss. I'm sure those of you guys that were following my free plays are very familiar with that fight, as we did pick Nazim Sadykhov, Nasty Nas, to defeat Evan Elder. That play did cash. But let's be honest, Evan Elder was really picking up the pace as that fight was moving on. The fight was stopped due to a cut. So Evan Elder losing via TKO, but in a fight that he was really just starting to get going. And this kid has really good cardio. We know that he has the wrestling background. I love the fact that he has been traveling and doing his camps over at Team Killcliff FC, one of the best gyms in the world. I think that the future is very, very promising for this kid, Evan Elder. So again, when you take a look at the fact that he is on I believe a 2-fight losing skid, just as Genaro Valdéz is, and he is, there are kind of different types of 2 losses in a row. Took that tough loss to Preston Parsons, a fighter that I think is he's a tricky fighter. He has some solid grappling, and that was a fight that also played out very closely. And I just think that Evan Elder is finally coming to right now. He's finally really starting to catch his groove, and those 2 losses don't really sum up who he is. Well, on the other hand, Genaro Valdéz, I mean, he's a fighter that landed that big knockout blow in Dana White's Contender Series. Before that, really fighting low-level competition. If you even want to consider Patrick White a step up in competition, I mean, I guess so. I'm not really even too crazy about that victory there, but he did land the big KO shot there. Since coming to the UFC, got dominated by Natan Levy in his last fight due to his takedown defense and his grappling. Matt Frevola knocked him out in the first round in a crazy fight. Now, listen, I'll give Genaro Valdéz his credit. I know that this is a fighter that's willing to throw down the feet, has some power. I mean, he has proved that he is a fight finisher with, just to point out real quick, out of his 10 victories, half of them coming by way of knockout. I understand that he's a tough fighter. I like the fact that he's been putting in some work with Michael Morales specifically a lot as of recently. And he trains with some of the best South American fighters in the world. I know he's very hungry to get back in the win column. But when I break tape down on both these fighters, Evan Elder is the much more promising fighter here, in my opinion. I think Elder has the potential to knock Valdéz out on the feet. Valdez's chin has definitely taken some damage as of recently. But I think more importantly, the grappling is where I'm worried for Valdéz. I think that Valdéz better have been trying to sharpen up his grappling and his takedown defense, or otherwise I really do see Elder just dominating the fight down in the mat, and potentially we see a finish down in the mat in some aspect. You keep an eye on this kid, Evan Elder, 0-2 in his first 2 UFC fights. Still has such a promising career ahead of him, right? That's pretty cool there. So, sometimes some of these fighters, they start their careers off a little bit on the wrong foot, I guess you would say. But this isn't boxing, right? This isn't the sport where you lose 1 or 2 fights and you're just written off. Evan Elder can turn the tables and really start to put things together here, and that's what I expect from him. Right now, he opened up as a -260 on BetUS, and he's now currently a -290. So action coming in on him, even when the line opened up pretty high. And that just shows you, man, these lines are so accurate, man. Back in the days, you see a fighter that just lost 2 fights in a row. People aren't really dissecting the way they lost the fight, right? Like when we talked about the Nasty Nas fight, and you would see this line much closer. You probably see Evan Elder as like a -185 favorite. People, the sharps, man, Vegas, they know what they're doing here. Evan Elder should be like a -260 to that -290 range. He's deserving of. He's very, very likely to go out here and dominate this fight. Maybe you want to be a little bit careful if you see it towards -350, 360, but I still see value on this line up here. And unfortunately, you're not really able to catch this line in the high -100s, -185, 190, like you probably could have done in way back in the day. It's just a different world betting on MMA these days. But Evan Elder will dominate this fight. I think the grappling is going to come into play in a major way. In the featherweight division, we got Austin Lingo taking on Mel Costa. Mel Costa, you guys were familiar with him as he made his UFC debut against the very talented Thiago Moises. That's a very big ask of a fighter to come in their debut at such a young age and take on a fighter like Moises. Obviously, things didn't go his way. Things actually started off decent for him, but he was eventually subbed in the second round. He showcased some of his skill set early on in the first round, though. This is definitely not a fighter that's not UFC worthy. This is a guy that belongs in the octagon, and I think that time will tell. On a serious note, I know he came into the fight with the purple dyed hair and whatnot, and I was actually wondering if that was kind of a tip of a hat to Scott Jorgensen. I would like to know that. You guys, if you remember Scott Jorgensen, he had a similar skin. I don't know what you want to call it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. They had that same type of, I don't know if it's a disorder or whatever you want to call it. And I wonder if he actually knows about Scott Jorgensen, because Scott Jorgensen was a fighter that I really enjoyed watching for years back in the WEC. An absolute hammer, used to ground and pound the crap out of fighters. We go to this fight here. Austin Lingo is a fighter that definitely relies on his boxing to have success in mixed martial arts. Obviously, he's working on his overall craft, but this is a fighter that has some solid hands. And, if he's going to have success here, I think he's really going to have to keep this fight standing and have a lot of success off the jab and just working combos with his hands. I know it's an MMA fight, but it's going to start there. He has to have success there because I do believe that Mel Costa will be a little bit more of the diverse striker. And, maybe as Mel's trying to work the kicking game, I would like to see Lingo countering with some heavy shots to the face there. Austin Lingo in his last fight, wasn't the best look for him, right? Started off decent, but eventually was taken down by Nate Landwehr and was submitted in the second round. We know Nate is a pretty solid grappler in his own right. He has some solid wrestling, and he did break him there. Before that, Lingo victories over Luis Saldana and Jacob Kilburn. Lower level fighters, if you ask me. Had a loss against Yusuf Zalal there too. Grappling coming into play a little bit. A knockout over Solo Hatley Jr. over an LFA before that. So, Austin Lingo was having a really tough time getting a fight put together over the last couple of years. Finally got that match with Nate Landwehr. Things didn't go his way. I know he's very hungry to finally get a W here. And I was very close to picking him to win this fight. We'll get to the line here in a second. But the more I break down tape on them, I just think that Mel is the more promising fighter, the more well-rounded and diverse fighter. And I think that there is some likeliness that Mel can get this fight down to the mat and have some success. He's a fighter that has had 5 subs already. He's only 26 years old. He has a lot of experience for his age. Lingo, just, the 11 pro fights there. I know he's still, cruising into his prime at only 29 years old, but I've seen more from Costa at this point in time. He's going to have almost a 3-inch reach advantage. He's a little bit more of a rangy fighter. He'll have the kicking game going for him and whatnot. And I just think that Costa gets his first W here in the UFC. So that's the route I'm going to go. Let's take a look at the betting line here. Lingo is going to be the dog. He's a plus-180 dog right now on BetUS. He opened as a plus-105, so action definitely coming in on Mel Costa. And, I'm a little surprised to see the line get up as high as it is. I do believe that Lingo's a dangerous boxer. He's obviously working on that takedown defense. He knows he needs to refine that and whatnot. And if he can keep this fight standing, I think he can have success with the boxing. I think that the value right now is more so on Lingo at that plus 180 line, especially. I'm not really crazy about Mel at a minus 230 line. I need to see a little bit more from him, but I do like Mel Costa to get the job done here. I think that that line should be more like a minus 190, minus 200 type of line there. You know, I mean, if he goes out there and gets the job done, it is what it is. But he is the more diverse mixed martial artist. So, yeah, I will lean Mel Costa. He looked good early on against Thiago Moises. I expect more of that in this fight here. Viktoriya Dudakova makes her UFC debut this upcoming weekend as she takes on Istela Nunes. Istela Nunes, a fighter that definitely possesses some solid skills, but also a fighter that just seems to come up short in all the biggest fights of her career. But this isn't a fighter, in my opinion, in Istela Nunes that's just completely incompetent. She's just a fighter that I think has some mental miscues when she's in there and just seems to fall short. The athleticism, the striking, the footwork, it's all on point. And in her last fight against Yasmin Jauregui, a very talented fighter, she held her own early on in that fight. She had her moments, but eventually she did break down and she was finished. If you guys remember that fight, that was a good one there. Before the Yasmin Jauregui fight, she had a loss to Sam Hughes. There was some controversy there with the eye poke late in that fight. She was submitted late by Ariane Cornelossi, but the Cornelossi fight, she was coming off a very long layoff. She hadn't been in there for about three and a half years before coming in back to fighting against Cornelossi. And you know, that's a tough ask to come back to the cage with that long layoff. And then, you know, Ariane Cornelossi is a bull. You know, the Angela Lee loss, I believe that was for the Anthem, if I'm saying that right, the Anthem weight title over in ONE FC or whatnot. You know, Angela Lee, a recognizable name too. So in those big fights, she's come up short. And listen, this upcoming fight is a huge fight for her. So is she going to come up short again? I think that she will have the edge in striking as the fight takes place at bay. But the problem is that a fighter like Dudakova, we saw it on Dana White's Contender Series. This is a fighter that's very physically strong, and she's very tenacious and will continuously march forward to get that takedown. You might be able to reverse her even a time here or there, but she'll work her way right back up, and she'll get back up to her feet, and she'll look to take you right back down. I mean, this is the type of fighter that she is. I do expect that we'll see growth from her striking as well. We've definitely seen that she's been working on that. I mean, listen, I would love nothing more than to see Dudakova to live up to the potential that she has. I mean, she's a looker, but I'm still not sure she's going to be able to hang specifically on the feet with Nunes. She's definitely going to have to continuously change levels and get this fight down to the mat. Otherwise, I do feel that she will be in some trouble here. Istela Nunes is a very live dog, in my opinion. We're going to slide over to the betting line here in a second as we just take a little bit of a longer look at Dudakova, right? Why not, huh? You know, but on a serious note here, back to what I was saying, I do believe that Istela Nunes can use her footwork and outstrike Viktoriya Dudakova on the feet. It's just that Dudakova will continuously march forward, and I do believe that she will eventually break down Istela Nunes late in this fight. I've seen Istela Nunes kind of come up short late in fights too many times for me to really back her here. But she is live. She's very live. So let's slide over to the betting line here, and I'll explain more what I mean by that. Istela Nunes is a plus 190 dog. She opened up as a plus 300, which is ridiculous. Plenty of value there. Plenty of value at the plus 250 line. I mean, the line obviously closing a lot closer as of recently, so that value not really there as much right now. But I would still argue that the value is on her, even at a plus 170 line, compared to, you know, trying to snag a minus 240 line on Dudakova. I mean, what are you doing with that minus 240 line? I mean, you're mixing that in a two-team parlay. I mean, how much can you trust that a fighter like Dudakova that's still young and green, how much can you trust that she's going to get this fight down to the mat and just dominate? Because if she doesn't, if she struggles with those takedowns, she will get hit with some big shots and she will be picked apart on the feet. But at the end of the day, I do believe that pressure is going to be a lot for Nunes, and I just can't even back her. I can't back her, and I don't even trust her at the dog odds there, the value. I'd stay away from it. Personally, I'll sit back and try to see what this girl Dudakova is about and if she's actually going to be legit moving forward. Give me Viktoriya Dudakova. Maybe she pulls off a sub in the third round, second round. Maybe she breaks Nunes late. But again, maybe we see Nunes use her footwork and set up some big shots on the feet and bloody up that pretty face of Dudakova. We'll see how that one plays out. In the featherweight division, we have two fighters coming off some tough losses. Both men were just recently submitted. Tucker Lutz caught in a guillotine choke, I do believe, by the very inconsistent Daniel Pineda. Not a good performance for him. Melsik Baghdasaryan got caught in that rear naked choke by Joshua Kulibau. I want to talk a little bit more here about Melsik Baghdasaryan. This is a fighter that's a very talented striker. We know that his background is his striking. He came from the kickboxing scene over to the MMA world. Respect for that. He really only legitimately became a pro mixed martial artist in 2019. So we're only talking about 4 years of legitimate MMA experience under his belt. I think that he's very much still learning. You saw him panic in his last fight when Kulibau took his back. He did panic and he did get submitted. I expect him to come back very hungry for this fight, and obviously he went back to the drawing board and he's working on those things. It seems that he had some distractions going into his last fight as well. I believe he just had his first child. Kind of a trip here. I guess he is family friends with Jean-Claude Van Damme, a mixed martial arts legend in his own right. Obviously not an MMA fighter, but back in the day, MMA wasn't what it is today. So maybe Jean-Claude Van Damme would have been a guy fighting in the MMA. Instead, he was a Hollywood martial arts type guy, but a legitimate martial artist nonetheless. But that's pretty cool that he's family friends with him. You got Jean-Claude Van Damme holding your child. That's pretty cool. But I do believe there may have been some distractions going on with Melsik. Hopefully Melsik went back to the drawing board and persistently worked on his takedown defense and his grappling and how not to panic and to just defend subs, work your way back up to the feet where you could showcase the talented striking that you have. Tucker Lutz, more of a meat and potato type of fighter. If you ask me, he's decently well-rounded everywhere. I'm not really too impressed with anything. If he's going to have an edge here, it has to be with him maybe trying to change levels and getting this fight down to the mat at some point in time. Tucker Lutz, a decent striker. He'll throw some heavy leg kicks and whatnot, but I have to believe that Melsik will have the edge there. So, how do I see this fight playing out? I'm going to say that Melsik can keep this fight standing. Overall, Melsik has actually showcased pretty good takedown defense so far. Since he's really been on the scene since the Dana White's Contender Series fight a couple of years ago and whatnot. He has showcased a 76% takedown defensive rate. Now, he hasn't fought the highest level of grapplers, so that's something you do have to take note. He's fought really low-level competition, if you want to be honest, even through his UFC career so far. Victories over Bruno Souza, okay, Colin Anglin, Dennis Bazooka. That name gives me a problem there, but you guys know Dennis. He is a talented fighter, I believe, fighting out of Serra-Longo. I believe he's fighting from the Northeast, but a decently tough fighter there. But again, not a lot of big names. If we want to be honest, Joshua Kulibau would have been the biggest name, and he fell short in that fight. So we'll see how he rebounds here. I'm going to say that Melsik keeps this fight standing, and the performance that Tucker just put out was not impressive to say the least. I was very disappointed in his performance that night, and both men had horrible performances, and I'll put Lutz more to the fire the way he showcased himself against Daniel Pineda. Again, Daniel Pineda is so up and down, hard to judge that fight, but I'm going to say Melsik has a good amount of success on the feet. Watch the kicking game of Melsik Baghdasaryan. He's very dangerous with the head kicks and whatnot. He's always live to land a nasty head kick knockout. His boxing sharp. He's a minus 220 favorite, now a minus 215 favorite. We've seen this line bouncing back and forth a little bit, but in a very minor way, just a little line movement, but a little bit up and down. And I would expect that Melsik settles right around a minus 200, a 2-1 favorite. And I'm not really crazy about backing him at that line personally, with the performance that he just had. Maybe Lutz gets a hold of him, gets this fight down to the mat and can secure a sub. Maybe we see Melsik panic again. So I do believe there's more value on Tucker Lutz. Anything from plus 175 down, 170, anywhere around there, there's plenty of value. But once you're starting to talk about maybe plus 130, 140, maybe not so much there. But, the line that's available, I would say there's value on Lutz. I'm still going to say that Baghdasaryan gets the better of him with his striking and takes this fight. But I'm not willing to back him at a line that's around that 220. Even I'm not really willing to even back him at a minus 200 line, to be honest. All right, we're on the main card here, and I think we're talking about the most exciting fight throughout this card. Terrance McKinney taking on Nazim Sadykhov. Both these fighters bring the fight. I think that's exactly what you can expect here. You're going to be targeting the under in one way or another here. I don't know if we see this fight go in 3 rounds. Terrance McKinney, I mentioned that I saw him running around the arena in Orlando at a recent UFC event that I went to. Seems to be a guy that really enjoys himself. I'm assuming he was having some drinks that night. At least he looked like it. He was running around smiling and just doing laps around the arena. I mean, you saw him everywhere you went. And, this is a guy that's had some controversy outside the cage back in the day, but seems to have bettered himself and has settled in as one of the most fun fighters to watch in the UFC. This is a guy that goes out there and looks to starch his opponent, and if he doesn't starch them, then he goes out on his shield. So, I mean, nothing but respect towards his way. He's also a fighter that has an underrated grappling and wrestling background. This is a fighter that has a collegiate wrestling background. Not a lot of people realize that or talk about that because he's always going out there looking to knock his opponent out. But he's also a fighter that is defensively flawed, if we want to be honest, and he's a fighter that's unreliable. I mean, we could talk about some of the big losses that he's taken over the years. Was just knocked out by Ismail Bonfim, the very talented Bonfim, got hit with the flying knee. Drew Dober knocked him out in a fight where they were really going toe-to-toe there. How about when Derek Minner submitted him on the regional scene? Or how about the knockout that he took against Sean Woodson? If you guys remember Sean Woodson, we haven't seen him in a while, but Sean Woodson was a massive underdog in that fight. I believe he caught him with the flying knee as well. So Terrance McKinney is a fighter that is prone to being put out, right? His chin is suspect, if you ask me, but his power is legitimate. So I'm going to get to my pick here and why I'm going with my pick here in a second, but I think that McKinney is definitely live to use his wrestling here and help solidify some rounds if he can fight an intelligent fight. I just don't trust it, though. I think that these two fighters are going to go to war. Nazim Sadykhov is a well-rounded fighter, has been putting in some real work over at Serra-Longo. Coming off a crazy fight against Evan Elder. You guys heard me raving about Evan Elder earlier as well. I think that Evan Elder and Nazim Sadykhov are two underrated fighters at the moment that are really going to prove themselves over the years. And the same could be said about McKinney, or maybe he's already done that. But the reason why I'm picking Nazim Sadykhov to win this fight is for the sheer fact that I think that his southpaw stance, the power that he throws, and just the way that this fight's going to play out with both these guys throwing bombs at each other, I think it favors Nazim Sadykhov because I believe that he'll be more durable, he'll hold up more so, and I think that McKinney will crumble in this fight. I mean, the chin has been tested, it's been hurt, and McKinney has the reach advantage. He'll have about a 4.5 reach advantage. He'll have that wrestling advantage. I was very close to picking Terrance McKinney here. We'll get to the line. But Nazim Sadykhov, I think that power is going to hurt Terrance McKinney here. Nazim Sadykhov is a nasty striker, and he's only going to look better and better each fight as he only has 9 pro fights under his belt. He's working with some of the best in the game. I think he looks better than ever going into this fight. And Terrance McKinney, on the other hand, he is coming off that nasty knockout loss. So how's the chin going to look? All right. I mean, this isn't Eric Gonzalez, right? He's not going to go out here and just submit Sadykhov easily like Eric Gonzalez. Eric Gonzalez, not a UFC caliber fighter, in my opinion. Not really. Let's look at the betting line here. So Nazim Sadykhov is a -150 favorite right now. Open at a -155. Line on BetUS dipped all the way to or rose to a -165 and dipped back to a -145 line. So the line kind of moving around a little bit. I'm sure a lot of you guys are licking your chops to see that you can get McKinney at dog odds here in a spot like this with their wrestling background. But I just caution you that if he doesn't land that big knockout shot first, I wouldn't rely on him to use his wrestling to take over this fight and fight an intelligent fight here. I think he's going to be going out here looking to knock out Nazim, and I'm worried about his chin holding up. I'll tell you guys that right now. So I was close to picking McKinney. I think McKinney has a lot of advantages in this fight, but the main advantage, the most impactful advantage goes Sadykhov's way with him being the more durable fighter here, the more battle-tested fighter, right? Nazim Sadykhov, let's see real quick. His one loss was via submission, right? So this is a fighter that's never been knocked out, not a lot of fights, but his one loss was over at Ring of Combat that he lost back in 2018, 5 years ago, all right? So he's definitely refined his game, and I think that he lands a big southpaw shot and wobbles McKinney and knocks him out. That's the route I'm going with this fight. Should be a fun fight here in the lightweight division. Francisco Prado taking on Ottman Azaitar, two fighters that like to throw down in the feet, two strikers. Francisco Prado came into the UFC 11-0, undefeated, with the world of finishes under his belt. In fact, finishing all 11 of his wins, and he really ran into some trouble in his UFC debut as he took on Jamie Mullarkey. Jamie Mullarkey actually using his grappling to stifle Prado. Really had a size and length advantage in that fight. It was a learning experience for Prado. He's still only 21 years old. I was impressed with what I saw from Prado on the feet early on for the limited time it took place there. But I really believe he is a fighter that's dangerous, and I do believe he's a fighter that will have his time to knock some dudes out in the octagon. He has to continue to work on his craft, though. He has to be able to keep the fight standing. Now, luckily enough for him, Ottman Azaitar is a fighter that favors a striking match. He is a fighter that is a kickboxing type of fighter. He goes out there and looks to knock his opponents out. Out of his 13 wins, 9 via knockout. He's had 2 subs. But also keep in mind that Prado has had 6 subs in his own right, even though, like I said, a lot of room for growth with his grappling. I'm hoping this fight takes place in the feet. I'm expecting that it does. I think that these guys look to trade. And listen, if you're looking on Tapology, or if you're looking online, even here, you see Prado with the 76-inch reach. I think that is a mistake. All right. I believe he actually has a 69-inch reach. So don't think that Prado has a 5-inch reach advantage here. I think, in fact, he has a 2-inch reach disadvantage. If you go to Tapology, you're going to see that 76-inch marker as well, I believe. And you do. All right. 76 to 71. That's not the case. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I do believe Azaitar will have that length and reach advantage. Understand that. In fact, Prado has a little bit of T-Rex syndrome. The arm's looking kind of short when he's in there, but does carry some power. He is diverse with his attacks. And, real quick, Ottman Azaitar coming off a big-time knockout loss to Matt Frivola. Really, when you take a look at his victories that he's had throughout the years, not looking that good these days. The knockout he had over Kamaworthy has shown that he is susceptible to being knocked out. Even leaving the UFC, getting knocked out in the regional scene against guys like Trevor Peek with his wild attacks. He knocked out Timo Packlin, a BJJ scrub, a guy that wasn't really worthy of being in the octagon. I'm going to say that Prado shows up here. How about that? I'm going to say that the young buck shows up, and with his diverse striking and the fact that Ottman Azaitar just took some real damage, I just don't trust him right now. 33 years old. I think Prado might be the more durable and just younger. Well, he is the younger fighter, but the more durable and youthful fighter that will show up on the night. So give me Francisco Prado, and let's go take a look at the betting line. This betting line, very close. Prado is currently a minus 125 favorite. He was a minus 155 favorite not too long ago. And so you're seeing money thrown down on Ottman Azaitar, which I'm not surprised based on the fact that Prado's takedown defense and grappling was very suspect in his last fight. Azaitar, a little bit older, maybe a little bit more battle tested in the octagon and whatnot. But I don't think that Ottman has really showcased that his grappling is just something that he could use just to dominate this fight down on the ground. I think it's definitely realistic, but we haven't really seen it from him. And again, he likes to throw down. That points me towards Prado's direction. It's basically a pick'em line, so at this point, so I could say that there's not really a problem if you're taking Prado, but I'm not really crazy about the line. If I'm kind of letting you know that as well, right? I'm not crazy about trusting Prado on the spot. Maybe you can get it even more so at a legitimate pick'em, like a minus 110 line. That would be nice there if you like Prado. Otherwise, you might even be able to argue there's still some value on that dog line on Azaitar. This card, man, this card with the lines, Norma Dumont taking on Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler is the female version of Nate Diaz every time we talk about her, because there is some ridiculous amount of similarities between the two. Obviously, she's fighting out of Stockton, California. She fights out of that southpaw stance. Her striking's crisp. She has good boxing. She kind of has a Nate Diaz type style. You tag her with a good shot, she has a similar reaction to what you would see from a Nate Diaz. You go down to the mat, she has shown that she's competent down there as well. Her jiu-jitsu is smooth. I was very impressed with what I saw from her in her last fight, where she went out there and absolutely decimated the former Invicta champion in Georgia Storlienko, where she finished her in the first round. Now, if you remember that fight, when you first saw the bell ring and that fight start to take place, a lot of us were probably instantaneously questioning who Chelsea Chandler was, because she was taken down very easily, and it looked like it was going to be a quick night for her or a long night for her, however you want to phrase that. It wasn't going to be a good night for her. But you know what? She got back to her feet and then was stuffing takedowns. She was just picking Storlienko apart on the feet, really transitioning beautifully down in the mat, reversing Storlienko, and just put it on her. And she seemed to be very, very comfortable with her striking as well. So, I mean, this is a fighter that I'm excited to continue to see perform in the octagon. I'm excited to see how far she can push it. She's a tough chick, to say the least. This is a girl that, if really tested, I expect her to be a willing participant in a war. She's the type of fighter I could see getting bloodied up, just how Nate Diaz used to get bloodied up, and she'll continuously march forward. I think there's a lot of exciting fights for her in the near future. And then her opponent, Norma Dumont, is without a doubt a fighter that's reliable, well-rounded, continuously goes in there and gets the job done. And as of recently, she's won 5 of her last 6 fights. Another big victory for her against Carol Rosa, who Rosa just had a victory finally. Absolutely played with Daniel Wolf. I mean, that was a mismatch. Daniel Wolf, the former boxer. Close loss to Macy Chiasson. Victories over Aspen Ladd, Felicia Spencer, Ashley Evans Smith, who we spoke about earlier. Not the biggest names on her resume, really, but some notable names, recognizable names. But Norma Dumont is a fighter that is well-rounded, right? She's a fighter that can handle business anywhere this fight goes. But I'll tell you what, man, from what I saw from Chelsea Chandler in her last fight, and it may have been against a lower level opponent, I've been more impressed with what I saw from her in that fight than what I've really seen from Dumont ever before. And that's going to side me to pick Chelsea Chandler here. I am going to be picking Chelsea Chandler. Again, training out of Stockton, and training with a lot of the similar individuals that we've seen surrounded with the Diaz brothers throughout the years. I am going to be picking Chelsea Chandler here. I mean, now we can't really go too much on these numbers. Chelsea Chandler just having 1 fight under the UFC banner, but landing 8.94 strikes per minute in that last fight, just really putting an onslaught, only absorbing 2.82 strikes. Norma Dumont, also a good ratio, landing 3.45 strikes per minute throughout her career, while only absorbing 2.07. She's been a very efficient fighter. Norma Dumont maybe a more proven up until this point in time, but I think that the ceiling is much higher on the Chelsea Chandler, and I have a feeling that she rises to the occasion here. I think that she lands some crisp shots on the feet. I think she holds her own if Norma wants to push the pace down to the mat, and I am picking Chelsea Chandler to get the job done. So let's go take a look at the betting line here. Chelsea Chandler is a plus 120 dog. She opened up as a minus 115 not really a favorite. Essentially, this was opened at a pick'em line, and then action going towards Norma's way. People probably feeling that Norma is just a more proven fighter at this point in time, and they're not really ready to bank on Chelsea with the limited amount of action we've seen from her, and maybe not really respecting Storlienko either as that first fight that she won in the UFC. Me, on the other hand, I would say I'm more impressed with what I've seen from Chandler, even though Norma's always kind of been a fighter that's reliable and consistent, just hasn't really overwhelmed me. And the level of competition has been Okay, so give me Chelsea Chandler here. Obviously, I do feel there's more value on dog odds at Chelsea Chandler, and we see that line going more that way, so maybe you monitor it and maybe even get some more value there if we see action continue on Norma Dumont. Some heavyweight action taking place at the top of the card here between Walt Harris and Josh Parisian. We always got a special place in our hearts in the MMA world for Walt Harris. Obviously, what happened to him, with the whole situation with his stepdaughter and all that, absolutely horrible. And Walt Harris showed throughout that whole entire incident what kind of man he is and what kind of man he was. I mean, this is just a class act individual. He's a phenomenal fighter as well, if you ask me. He hasn't been that active, and I know that he's on a 3-fight losing skid, but we could take a look at the level of competition that he was battling in those 3 losses. Losses to Marcin Tybura, Alexander Volkov, and Alistair Overeem, and even having his success at points in time throughout those fights. Almost finished Alistair Overeem early on in that fight, and that was the return fight after that horrific incident took place. It would have been amazing if he would have went out there and finished Overeem, but of course, Overeem, just a crafty veteran. He weathered the storm, and eventually he did break Walt Harris there. And we understand that Walt Harris is a little bit of a front runner. He's an explosive athlete that carries some serious power. We've seen him kind of fizzle before in some fights. That would be a little bit of a hole in his game. If you could wrestle and grapple and drag him to the deep waters, we have seen him take some L's there. But he's always a fun fighter to watch, and he's a fighter that can, without a doubt, go out there and starch his opponent very early on. And I think that this is another fight where we could potentially see that. Even though he's 40 years old, seems to be in good shape coming into this fight. Again, the power is there. Fights out of the southpaw stance, and that big shot is very likely, especially against a guy like Josh Parisian, who is a little bit slow and clunky on the feet. You know, Josh Parisian, a very different type of fighter. This is a fighter that is a more slow-paced fighter. He'll try to use his size to kind of try to get on top of his opponent, work some ground and pound, try to break an opponent that's lacking in a specific department down on the mat. We've seen that from him. I mean, we could talk about his resume real quick. You know, Josh Parisian, still only 34 years old, a lot more youthful, coming off a loss to Jamal Pogues. Had the knockout against Ailin Boudat. That was a fight where he was hurt early on, and then Ailin Boudat broke down, didn't have takedown defense, and he broke him in the second round. Ailin Boudat, you could argue there's some similarities between him and a Walt Harris. You know, he got broken himself, did Parisian against Dontel Mays. Not really the best look. He defeated Rock Martinez. Rock Martinez, a fighter that looked to be 3 weight classes lower than him there. That was what it was. He lost to my boy, Porker Porter. You know, that's never the greatest look. Nothing but love for Porker, but you know, Pork. You know, he had the victory against Chad Johnson on Dana White's Contender Series, a name that really disappeared. And, you know, Josh Parisian, a great guy, just not too impressed with what I've seen from him throughout the years. If he's going to go out there and get the job done, I think he weathers the storm early, and maybe we see Walt breathing heavily, and maybe we see Josh get on top of him and break him late in this fight. But I'll tell you what, I think there's a much more realistic possibility or a realistic chance that we see Walt Harris land some big shots early on and just be the better striker throughout this fight. He just needs to manage his gas tank properly, and I do believe that this is Walt Harris's fight, in my opinion. And real quick, let's talk about some of the bigger victories that Walt Harris has had. I know we talked about his losses, but knocked out Alexei Oleinik, knocked out Sergey Spivak back in 2019, knocked out Daniel Spitz. Let's see here. You know, real quick, put a little asterisk next to the Mark Godbeer fight. It says method KO, TKO. I believe this was a fight. There was a very awkward ending to that fight, and I believe it was actually Walt Harris that was beating Godbeer up, and there was a DQ or something like that. I don't know. Why is that's not looking right to me there. I think there was a DQ or something happened. There was some type of something weird happened. Anyways, you know, submitted by Fabricio Verdum, a great fighter, knocked out Chase Sherman, knocked out Cyril Asker. I mean, the power is there. All right. So the biggest victory, of course, being over Sergey Spivak, a fighter that's a legitimate heavyweight fighter right now. But the age is something to be concerned with, also being 40 years old. At the end of the day, also go with my boy, the big ticket, who is right now on BetUS a minus 165 favorite. He was a minus 220 favorite. He opened as a minus 220 favorite. A lot of action coming in on Parisian, and I think that's without a doubt due to the fact that people are concerned if Walt Harris doesn't get that early knockout, that he will flake and fizzle later on in this fight. And Parisian's size and durability is something that people are willing to back at that type of line. And you know, we take a look at Parisian's losses. Out of 6 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times, submitted once, and a couple of decision losses there as well. So yeah, Josh can take a punch. He seems to have been able to take a punch throughout his career. Hopefully Walt Harris paces himself. I don't want him to go out there and look for an early knockout. Pace yourself, Walt Harris, and you will be the more talented striker. You'll be more athletic. Use your footwork, and you will win this fight. And if that knockout comes, it comes. Do not break the tank. All right, don't break the tank. If you guys know what I'm saying, that's not a shout out to Frank the Tank. Shout out to the comedian there. What's his name? The all-time great comedian, Frank the Tank. Why is his name slipping my mind right now? You guys know a movie I'm talking about. Old School, I think it was. Someone comment his name below, man. One of my favorite comedians of all time. I'm brain fogging. Walt Harris is the pick. In the co-main event, we got Albert Duryov taking on Jun Young Park. Albert Duryov, 34 years old. This is a fighter that has shown to be a really dangerous hammer, but kind of a suspect nail, if you guys know what I'm saying. Joaquin Buckley kind of put him on blast a little bit. You know, when you give him some resistance, we've seen him slow down a little bit or kind of question himself at times in there. But when things are going his way, yes, he is a very dangerous fighter. We saw that on Dana White's Contender Series where he broke his opponent early on in that fight. I guess you can argue that he showed that he can kind of dig deep in his last fight. He did win a closely contested match against Chidi Njokuani, but some things to work on. You see him side by side with the best jiu-jitsu player to have ever done it, or have ever, to have ever done it at this point in time, I guess you could say, in Gordon Ryan, right? I mean, who agrees with me there? I mean, I think that the resume doesn't lie. Hopefully he was getting in some legitimate work with Gordon Ryan. That would do wonders for his career. Albert Duryov is a guy, we heard Sean Strickland actually talking about him on the Joe Rogan Experience. Did you guys check that episode out? It was crazy. But Sean Strickland was talking about how great of a guy Albert Duryov is. He was telling Sean basically that he couldn't be friends with him if he's going to continue to badmouth, the religion and whatnot, which you can understand. And Sean Strickland even said, for him, he ain't going to do it anymore. So for Sean Strickland to show love towards Albert's way, it shows you how good of a guy Albert is. And he was saying how Albert's he's a very touchy-feely type of guy. He's just like a very warm type of guy, and you see it there as he's snuggling up with this boy. But you know what? Nothing wrong with that. I bet you he's a very loyal friend and a very good human being. But when it comes to him in the cage, I do have some questions about his overall mixed martial arts skill set. He has some decent power on the feet as well, not the most technically sound with the striking. On the other hand, Jun-Young Park is a fighter that has some really good boxing, a beautiful jab. He's a well-rounded fighter. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, this is a guy that can go out there and use his grappling, use his boxing to go out there and get the job done. And I think that he's the more well-rounded fighter overall. When you really analyze his resume. He's 32 years old, in the prime of his career right now, 21 pro fights. It's a great number. Just went out there, submitted Dennis Teolinen, submitted Joseph Holmes, had a victory over Eric Anders. The lone loss as of recently was against Gregory Rodriguez. Otherwise, you have to go all the way back to the Anthony Hernandez loss. That was his UFC debut fight, took place over in Asia, and he was actually winning that fight. He was on route to winning that fight before getting caught with the sub. So, I mean, he's a tough fighter, man. Victories over Tafana Chukwi, Marc-Andre Barriot, victories over John Phillips. I mean, he's beaten some legitimate guys. And although maybe I'll give the edge to Duryov as far as his wrestling and wrestling ability, maybe I would say, when things are going good, especially early on when he has the gas tank. But overall, I would say Jun-Young Park checks off a lot more boxes in this matchup. And I'm gonna pick Jun-Young Park to win the fight here. I think that he'll have success with his boxing. I side with him on the mental side of things more so than Albert Duryov. Park always shows up. He's willing to go to battle. And he doesn't mind being the nail. He'll continue to scrap and try to get a W. So I will side with Jun-Young Park here in this co-main event spot. Let's take a look at the betting line here. On BetUS, he is currently a minus 155 favorite. He opened as a minus 130, so action coming in on Park. People liking what they're seeing from him. And I think that's legitimate. I think that the minus 130 line, there's definitely value on him there, and I could see why action's coming in on him. He checks off more boxes. Duryov has had some questionable performances at times, and I'm not really sure he's going to be able to go out there and just grab Park and smash him down in the mat early on, right? If he doesn't get it done early on, let's see who digs deeper. I'll side with Park, and he has some underrated boxing. Again, watch that jab, and I expect him to bloody up Duryov. And Duryov has also shown that he's willing to stand and trade maybe more than he should at times. In the Roman Kopylov fight, he could have been going for some takedowns early on, and he wasn't, and was standing and trading, and he got bloodied up a little bit himself, even though he inflicted a lot of damage. He can land his big shots in his own right, but he takes damage as well. I think that Park will be a little bit more smooth there, and I like Jun-Young Park, and anything from minus 155 down is not a bad line in my opinion if you're liking him there. I don't really have a problem with that, but just understand that if Albert Duryov does show up, if he's mentally on point, he's a dangerous fighter in his own right. So just depends how you look at that, man, to be honest. That's a tough one. Hey, you guys, before we jump into the main event, I had to hop on the mic real quick and just talk about Bovada.lv. If you're looking for a new sportsbook, reach out to me so I can get you my referral link. You sign up through that referral link, you get an added bonus to your account. Plus, I will give you an entire card package for free. It's a great value. And at the end of the day, I just feel that Bovada.lv is one of the best sportsbook you could use. So if you're looking for a solid sportsbook that has good payouts and deposits, all that, does everything smoothly, this is a great website, all right? Also, if you're interested in my official plays and you're not looking for a new sportsbook, I'm always all ears as well. Shoot me an email or DM me on Instagram or Twitter. It's all scrolling below. All right, we got the main event. Holm taking on Myra. Bueno Silva fight taking place in the bantamweight division. Holm, a future Hall of Famer in the game, a former champion, a fighter that has just consistently stayed in the top 5 forever now. She's still ranked number 3. She's looking to hold on to to a spot in the top 5. Obviously, she doesn't want to start taking some L's. She's getting up there in age, and then before you know it, she could be talking retirement. But as long as she keeps going out there and getting the job done and looking decent while doing it, she'll obviously be hanging around. We know that she's always in phenomenal shape, which is an X factor that she has even up at age, right? She's a fighter that is in phenomenal shape. She's built differently. I mean, really, she's blessed with some solid genes, but obviously she puts in some serious work as well. We know that she's a phenomenal striker, but I would argue that the reason why that she's had so much success in MMA is not just her striking. It's the fact that she's such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. She's great in the clinch. She's very physically strong. In a fight that she didn't get the nod in recently, a fight that I thought that she should have probably got the nod against Ketlen Vieira. I know she took a lot of damage in that fight, but a lot of control time against the cage, throwing a lot of knees. She's not just a fighter that will control her opponent against the cage in a boring way. I mean, she's always active, throwing elbows, throwing knees, breaking off, throwing big shots. She's very tough. She has great footwork. Coming off a victory against Yana Santos. Before that, a victory against Irene Aldana and Raquel Pennington. I mean, you take a look at the losses that she's taken. They're all against the cream of the crop. Very, very big names. The Misha Tate fight where she lost the belt. Valentina Shevchenko, Jermaine Durandamy, a phenomenal striker. Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes. I mean, if you're not an amazing fighter, you're typically not getting the job done. Ketlen Vieira might be a little bit of the X factor there, but she's a good fighter as well. All right, so Myra Bueno Silva is going to have a tough task in front of her. She's been looking very good. Myra Bueno Silva has also showed that she is a very tricky fighter. She's been pulling off a variety of submissions as of recently, pulling off arm bars, knee bars. She's a tricky fighter. But not only has she been pulling off these subs, she's actually a fighter that is an underrated striker. She has great accuracy. She's a good striker, and I think that she could potentially hang with an aging Holly Holm here. She might land a big shot on the feet. We've seen Holly get bloodied up and take some big shots as of recently. Ketlen Vieira, we talked about the big shots she landed on Holly Holm. I think there's a realistic possibility that Myra can land some big shots here. Now, the question mark I have with Myra Bueno Silva is when you take a look at her resume, she's a fighter. Forget about not having those championship rounds under her belt, fighting in rounds 4 and 5. She's a fighter that's very, very rarely made it to the second and third rounds, or at least late in the second round or to the third round. She's a fighter that a lot of her fights don't go that long. So that's something that you have to pay attention to in a 5-round fight that could really be a war, and the fighter that digs deep late in this fight can prevail, especially when Holly Holm is hanging on you and making you work and working in the clinch. She has such a respectable name, that the crowd will be rooting for her and whatnot, or people will be rooting for her in general. Maybe that sways the judges a little bit. These are things to take into consideration. I understand this isn't going to be a giant arena and whatnot, but there'll be some people there, and just she has that respectable name in the game, so the judges always are going to put that respect on her there. If this fight plays out closely, maybe this time she gets the nod, especially with the rumblings of her kind of not getting robbed, but the fight that she potentially should have won where she didn't get the nod. There was a lot of disgruntled people after her fight with Ketlen Vieira. Maybe that pays dividends in this fight. We'll see. I think this is a fight that can definitely play out closely. I will be taking Holly Holm to get the job done here, specifically for what we were just recently talking about. The fact that Holly Holm has the experience late in fights. This is a championship fight. I need to see that Myra Bueno Silva can look good late in fights when Holly Holm just keeps pushing and just working like a stallion, like a horse that she is, just hanging on you, throwing knees in the clinch and whatnot. So if Myra Bueno Silva doesn't get an early knockout or get some type of early finish, I think that Holly Holm will take this fight over. Holly Holm will have a 2.5 inch reach advantage. She's 2 inches taller. Again, a phenomenal athlete. Give me the legend and Holly Holm here. Now, I don't say that with an overwhelming amount of confidence. Myra Bueno Silva is crafty. She's dangerous, and Holly Holm's 41 years old. Holly Holm is a minus 145 favorite right now, open as a minus 180. Action coming in on Myra Bueno Silva. I think that's very reasonable. Holly Holm's old, and Myra Bueno Silva's good. So the line should be a little bit closer, and I could even argue the value still on Bueno Silva at plus 120. I think this should be more of a pick'em fight, if you ask me. I think that this line should be a pick'em. So value on Myra Bueno Silva. I'll edge Holly Holm. I think that this should be a fight where you see a minus 110 and a minus 110 line on your books if things are correct. But we'll see how the line closes. I wouldn't be surprised if it did trend towards even odds. But give me Holly Holm to outwork Myra Bueno Silva late in this fight and take that decision. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up Holm versus Myra, Bueno, Silva. You guys know I love to leave you guys with some parting words. I have some good ones that I've been thinking about as of recently, but I'll save those for the bigger cards. UFC 291 coming up in a couple weeks. I'll save some of that deep talk for that because I got something important that I need to say anyway. It's more simplistic, but it's important. I just want to say real quick before we get into those words that I appreciate all your guys' support. It means the world to me. If you guys could like this video real quick before you leave this video, it really means a lot to me. Please do so. Please subscribe to the channel. Catch me on all my social media. And again, of course, if you ever want to work with me for my official plays, I'm here. You can reach out to me. But I do appreciate you guys greatly. All right. So what I'll say for this video, like I said, simplistic, but always very important. Make sure you guys are managing your bankroll properly. Check this out. Let's say you got $2,000-$3,000 right in your account, right? You're making bets and whatnot. You know, if you start to lose some money, a big issue that a lot of you guys have is that, let's say you started with 2K and now you're at 1,600. You get so annoyed that you're not instantly profiting that you start to chase and you make stupid bets, and before you know it, you blow your entire account. Now think about this. If you were at 1,600 and you start making these careless and reckless bets, and before you know it, you're at $800, $900, think about how you were visualizing that $1,600 account, right? You just can't wait to get back to 1,600, and then you understand that it wasn't the end of the world that you weren't where you started initially, because your spots will come, and then you can get back to 2K and you can start working your way up to 3K. All right, think about it like that, right? Because at the moment you're looking at that $1,600 account and you're like, oh, this should be at least 2,000. That's what I started with. This should be 2,500, 3,000. No, calm down, pump the brakes. This is a game that you want to work the long game, right? You're not just instantaneously wanting to have all the gratification in the world. Slow things down, work your bankroll back up to where you started, and get a hot streak going. All right, so think about it like that. Remember, for example, you know, you could skew the numbers to whatever you want to skew them to. But again, think about it. If you have a 2K bank account when you're at 16 or 15, don't look at that account like it's just done with and you're falling apart and you're losing all your money. Slow things down again, because think about how you would have thought about that $1,600 bankroll when you have $200 in your account when you started with that 2K. All right. Again, you could adjust the numbers to whatever you're working with. I just threw like a basic bankroll there, but you guys know what I'm saying. So think about that. All right. Be patient. Our spots will always come. All right. All right. It's all about the long game. All right. Over the last 10 years, I've been absolutely killing it almost every single year, especially for 2022 and 2021. 2023 has been a little bit of a rough year. We've had our ups and downs, but we still have plenty of time to bring a lot of profits in. We still have half of the year to go, essentially. All right, so we slow things down, we go back to the basics, and just, it's part of the game. You cannot win all the time, and sometimes you're gonna hit some patches and some tough bumps in the road. It is what it is. All right, it's part of the game. That's why it's so enjoyable when you're winning and you're making money. It's just not that easy all the time. All right, guys, I'll leave you guys with that. Enjoy the fights. I know it's not the biggest fight card, but we got some big ones coming up. All right, much love to all you guys. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.